I wanted to talk about the subject that some people may find a little bit offensive, but I do think it's one that should be addressed and should be at least talked about. After all, there is no reason not to talk about it. I'm talking about Aspergers syndrome and having the cure. And obviously this is a very controversial subject. For a start, in medical terms, is there really a cast iron cure? Is there a cure-all for Asperger syndrome? As far as I'm aware, well, clearly not. As my personal research has indicated, and for what is known, is it somehow affects the DNA and the genes. I'm obviously not an expert on the ins and outs of how it all works, because nobody actually knows of this moment in time. The question is, though, if there was a cure, would it be worth having? Now, I know a lot of people with Asperger syndrome will say that they don't want a cure, and there's arguments for both sides. You see, this is what I'm going to look at. I'm going to say before anybody else comes off the cuff is, yes, I would like a cure if it was possible. But there is no actual cure at the moment. But I want to talk about a few issues with that as well. I've lived with Asperger syndrome for well, I've lived with it all my life, obviously, but I was diagnosed when I was about 14, and it's well over 20, must be about 25 years, something of that range. And I can honestly say that it's not been an easy journey. Now, the question is, if things went better, if things did go what I could say is my way, would I have been happier or felt more happier with the fact that I've got Asperger's syndrome? That I don't know, and I can't answer. My personal experience is that life is not easy. For one thing, there is the anxiety, there is the difficulties that you have with socialising. I mean, I've never had a girlfriend in my entire life because I've made social blunders, and it's kind of so complex social interactions. And if it's difficult for so-called normal people, then you can't imagine how difficult it is for someone with Asperger's. Although people with Asperger's do get married, etc., etc. So it's not like I haven't given up hope yet. But nonetheless, as a result of it, it has been difficult. My career prospects and such haven't been great either. Generally, I mean, I've been lucky enough to have friends, and I've made quite a few friends, but figuring out people has never been easy, and sometimes it's an absolute nightmare dealing with people sometimes, and that's the honest truth of the matter. People are hard to deal with at times. And the other thing is, You can do without all the intolerance. There is unfortunately intolerance in this world, and you have to deal with it. You have to deal with people being impatient with you, people being thinking that you're a psychopath, or ridiculous things of their preconceptions of a condition that they know nothing about. And so, yeah, to some extent, it is suffering from a human ignorance. But if you're given a choice, you probably could live without it. That's the truth of the matter. However, I want to do on the flip side now. Asperger's syndrome affects your personality, affects who you are, affects how you see the world. And there are some aspects of it that I think, if I was cured tomorrow, how much of a different person would I actually be? You see, people lie all the time. People can be fake. People can not be direct and such. And these things aren't such a bad thing. I understand the concept of so-called white lies and such, but it is kind of refreshing to be around people that are honest, And I like to say that I can be honest and straight up. I've learned how to temper my honesty, shall we say, as in learn to say things in a nice way, even though they're true. Tell the truth in a nice way. But nonetheless, you can be a genuine person. Now, the other thing is, I have learned tolerance and compassion and empathy towards people. There's something to be said about when you see disabled people suffer, you do have empathy for them, especially people with autism and Asperger's. That's my experience. I mean, some people may not, but yeah, it opens your eyes to that world, because there are people that are in a certain way and they really can't help what they're like, and they have to deal with the difficulties they have. And let's be realistic, let's be honest, there are far worse things to have than Asperger's syndrome. I'm not going to say that it's an easy thing to deal with, but there are worse things to have. That's a fact of life. But you can empathise to an extent about what people are going through. People that have to suffer ignorance, people that have to suffer intolerance because they are different. So you learn those things. Think things like intimacy and being close to others is much more valuable and much more precious. What I see today is people just get really just don't care that much, and people are pretty selfish. Now, I know that sounds a little bit hypocritical, being someone with Asperger's saying about selfishness, because autism literally means to be within with oneself. But there are people out there that are selfish to the extent that it hurts others, and because I've got a very well developed sense of feeling empathy, whilst I can be selfish and live in that world of my own as such, it doesn't mean I would do anything that would hurt anybody. In fact, when I say things unwittingly that upset people, I feel very, very down, and I'm constantly apologising to them to the point of irritation. This condition in itself is a fundamental imprint on who you are. It makes you see the world. It It's the way you perceive everything. Now, I never got any psychological help or anything like that of how to deal with Asperger's syndrome. In fact, I had to live and learn as such, and that was more or less learning the hard way quite a fair bit. Now, could it be managed? Yes, I should think so. Nowadays, it's when somebody gets diagnosed, the problems are much more easier and it's more well known. When I was diagnosed at the time, nobody really knew about it, so there probably wasn't that much help available. That's a bit unfortunate, but nonetheless. But even if you do have all that help in the world, it's still part of who you are, though, you see. And that's the thing. You see the world. You're going to see the world from an Asperger's / autistic point of view. You know, that's part of who you are, and you have to learn to accept that fact. You know, I haven't run, and I don't believe in that the fact you should run from it. You can't pretend to live your life as a so-called normal person. You can work with what you've got as such. You know, I'm not going to say, oh yes, I've got Asperger's syndrome, so that's an excuse, so I can do what I like, or I can say what I like, or behave like what I like. That's not what I'm saying, because that's simply not true. You can learn ways of behaving and such. What I'm saying is you can learn only so much, but you have to accept that you can only get so far. I suppose it'd be likened to a foreign being a foreigner in another country. You might live in that country for many years, and you might learn the language, you might learn the culture, but you're still a person from another land, and you're still an outsider. To some extent, you'll still feel that loneliness, and you still will be different. So that's kind of the thing about Asperger's. Now, I've heard and seen about like some of the Americans. They're trying to forcefully cure it and such. They're constantly looking for a cure and such. And some of the things are pretty brutal, you know. It sickened me to my stomach, to be honest. They're kind of forcing behaviours and such. A person has to learn their own way. You can't force anybody to be a certain way down to your social expectations. It's not fair, or is it right? And I can imagine. I could imagine that some parents with fully autistic children, their lives must be really difficult. And kudos to their parents for doing that. Obviously, when you've got that autism of that severity, you do need help and such. And if they can kind of sort out the major issues with autism, then fair enough. But I just think sometimes you can't force a cure as such and be brutal as such. So it's at least something to think about. I personally would be over the moon if there was a cure as such. But what kind of person would I be is another question entirely. That is something that is to be wondered about, you know. With this condition. It's a complicated thing, and yeah, there'll be probably people that will disagree with me as regards the cure as such. That's great. If you've got the condition, you're happy with your life, that's fine. I'm not judging anybody. What I'm saying is, if it works for you, then great. But I think anybody who has Asperger's will at least say that there are some aspects that if they could go away, that life would be a lot better. I'm 100% certain on that. So, yeah, if you like this video, that's fine, but I would say that there is no cure as at this moment in time, probably in the far distant future, probably. But the question is down to each individual, really, if they want a cure for the condition, and how their life would be. Anyway, thank you for listening, and I will sign off now. Thank you. Bye.